What if I told you that one of the most powerful brain-supporting foods after 50 is already sitting in your kitchen, and yet almost no one uses it correctly for the brain? Not a drug, not a prescription, not an expensive supplement, a simple handful of blueberries. And yet, inside the aging human brain, something very interesting happens when this small fruit becomes a daily habit. Memory improves. Mental clarity sharpens, and the brain begins to function in a way that researchers didn't fully expect from something so simple. But here's where it gets even more important. This is not about blueberries being a superfood. This is about how the aging brain changes after 50, and how certain natural compounds interact with those changes at a biological level. I'm Dr. Richard, and in the next several minutes, I'm going to take you inside the aging brain, step by step, so you understand exactly what is happening, why mental decline begins so quietly, and how blueberries may support the systems that control memory, focus, and long-term cognitive health. Because brain aging doesn't begin with forgetting names. It begins much earlier, in silence, at the cellular level. After the age of 50, most people expect the body to slow down. But what very few people realize is that the brain is also undergoing gradual internal changes that are not immediately obvious. At first, there is no alarm, no diagnosis, no clear warning sign, just subtle shifts. You take longer to remember a word. You lose focus a little faster. You feel mentally tired after tasks that used to feel easy. Most people say, this is just aging. But what's actually happening is more specific than that. Inside the brain, three major biological systems begin to shift. The first is inflammation, the second is oxidative stress, and the third is energy production inside brain cells. Let's break this down in a way that makes sense. Inflammation is part of your immune system. It is designed to protect you. When you get injured or sick, inflammation helps your body heal. But after 50, something changes. Inflammation doesn't always turn off properly. Instead, a low level of inflammation can remain active in the background. Not enough to cause pain, not enough to cause obvious disease, but enough to slowly affect sensitive tissues, especially in the brain. Think of it like a fire alarm that keeps going off at a very low volume all day long. It doesn't destroy everything immediately, but over time it creates stress in the system. And brain cells are extremely sensitive to that kind of constant irritation. Now let's talk about oxidative stress. This is another major driver of brain aging. Every time your brain produces energy, it creates byproducts called free radicals. These are unstable molecules that can damage cells if they build up. Normally, your body has a defense system that neutralizes them. But with age, that balance becomes less efficient. So slowly, these free radicals begin to accumulate. And when they interact with brain tissue, they cause what scientists often describe as cellular wear. A simple way to imagine it is like metal slowly rusting over time. Not suddenly breaking, just gradual degradation. And because the brain uses one of the highest amounts of oxygen in the body, it is especially vulnerable to this process. Now here is where things start to connect. Inflammation and oxidative stress do not work independently. They actually reinforce each other. Inflammation increases oxidative stress. Oxidative stress triggers more inflammation. And together they create a cycle that slowly affects how brain cells communicate, especially in areas responsible for memory formation, like the hippocampus. That's the part of the brain that helps you store and retrieve new information. So when this system becomes stressed over time, memory feels less sharp. Not gone, just slower, less automatic, more effortful. But there is another system involved that most people never think about: blood flow to the brain. Your brain is only about 2% of your body weight, but it uses roughly 20% of your energy. That means it depends heavily on constant blood supply, oxygen, glucose, nutrients. Everything the brain needs comes through blood vessels. After 50, those blood vessels naturally become less flexible. The inner lining becomes more sensitive to inflammation, and circulation becomes slightly less efficient. Not enough to cause obvious disease in most cases, but enough to reduce optimal performance. And here is the important connection. Inflammation damages blood vessels. Damaged blood vessels reduce blood flow. Reduced blood flow stresses brain cells, and stressed brain cells produce more inflammatory signals. So now you have a loop, a slow loop, but a powerful one over time. Now this is where blueberries enter the picture in a very interesting way. Blueberries contain natural compounds called anthocyanins. These are plant pigments responsible for their deep blue color. But inside the human body, they do much more than provide color. They interact with multiple biological systems at once: inflammation pathways, oxidative stress responses, and blood vessel function. Let's start with inflammation. Research suggests anthocyanins may help reduce the activity of certain inflammatory signals in the body, not shutting inflammation off completely, but helping bring it back into balance. And that distinction is very important, because the goal is not to eliminate inflammation. The goal is to prevent it from becoming chronic. Now, oxidative stress. Anthocyanins act like molecular protectors. They can help neutralize free radicals before they cause damage to cells. This reduces the wear and tear effect happening inside brain tissue over time. Think of it as reducing internal corrosion, slowing down cellular aging at the microscopic level. Now the vascular system. Some studies suggest that anthocyanins may improve the function of the endothelium. This is the thin layer inside blood vessels that controls flexibility and blood flow. When this system works better, blood can flow more efficiently to the brain. That means more oxygen delivery, more nutrient support, and better overall brain performance. Now here is where the research becomes even more interesting. In clinical studies involving older adults, regular blueberry consumption has been associated with improvements in executive function. That means skills like planning, decision-making, and mental flexibility. These are some of the first abilities to decline with aging. Other studies have shown improvements in memory performance, especially in people who already have early cognitive decline. And brain imaging studies suggest changes in neural activity after blueberry intake, indicating improved brain efficiency. But here is the important scientific truth. These effects are not instant, they are not dramatic, and they are not the same for everyone. They depend heavily on consistency over time. Most research suggests a practical intake of about half to 1 cup per day. Fresh or frozen both work. Freeze-dried powder has also been used in scientific studies. But the biggest mistake people make is inconsistency. Eating blueberries once in a while does very little for long-term brain biology. The benefit comes from repeated exposure over time. Daily support, not occasional use. Now let's zoom out and understand the bigger picture. Because brain aging is not just about the brain alone. It is connected to metabolism. When blood sugar regulation becomes less efficient with age, inflammation tends to increase. When inflammation increases, brain signaling becomes less efficient. When brain signaling becomes less efficient, memory and clarity decline. So the brain is not isolated. It is part of a larger system involving metabolism, circulation, and inflammation balance. And blueberries sit right at that intersection. They do not act as a cure. They act as a supportive input into a larger biological system. Now let's be very clear and responsible here. Blueberries will not prevent dementia. They will not reverse neurological disease. And they are not a substitute for medical treatment. But what they may support, according to current evidence, is overall brain efficiency, vascular health, and inflammation balance as part of a broader lifestyle approach. And sometimes that is what matters most. Not dramatic interventions, but small, consistent habits that support the body's natural systems over time. Because brain aging is not a sudden event. It is a gradual process shaped by daily biology. And the choices you make every day quietly influence that trajectory. So let me leave you with this final thought. If something as simple as a daily fruit choice can influence inflammation, blood flow, and brain signaling, what else in your daily routine might be quietly shaping how your brain is aging? If you found this helpful, share your experience in the comments. And let me know, do you already eat blueberries regularly, or is this something you're considering adding? And if you want more science-based breakdowns on brain health, memory, and aging after 50, make sure you subscribe. I'm Dr. Richard, and I'll see you in the next one.